to take a big, ooh, whoops, let's go here. Right, for the sake of example, in that week, 3rd to 9th of June, there were, which is when the hostilities ended and there was a ceasefire, there were 40 people wounded in the West Bank by the use of excessive force, 151 Israeli occupation force incursions in all areas of the West Bank, A, B and C, 99 people arrested, 1 forced self-demolition. In Jericho, this is a bit odd, 10 tents and 9 barracks dismantled. You do come across this. 53 new temporary military checkpoints have been set up, and 99 people have been arrested. There's ongoing difficulties for the farmers in the rural areas of the West Bank because they're constantly under threat of settler violence. And on the 10th of June, a 16-year-old was shot in a village near Nablus because the village were protesting against a new illegal outpost on their land. I mention that because he is the 8th child killed in the West Bank this year in comparable circumstances. So you can see that pattern is always there. There have been a lot of injuries also in the village of Near Lynn, which has been struggling for decades to sort of protect their land and to demonstrate and to take legal action to try and stop encroachment on their land. So that's going on all the time. The story I always remember is, and this comes to Jerusalem, a few years ago, a young man was shot, a young Palestinian man was shot. At that time, there was suggestion and fear that people were using knives. Anyway, it makes no difference to the legal process. If you're suspected, you get shot. But his backstory is that when he was younger, when he was 2 years old, his mother had to go to, or chose to go to Jordan to look after a relative. And in East Jerusalem, you're not a citizen, you only have Jerusalem ID. She went to do that and she was not allowed to return. So this meant that this young guy did not have his mother from the age of 2. And that's routine. That's the sort of routine cruelty that has been going on. I'll come now to the particular circumstances around the attacks last month and what has been happening in Palestinian areas in relation to that. The structure in Israel-Palestine sort of across the areas is that it's deliberate fragmentation, deliberate separation, both of Jewish Israeli citizens and Palestinians, but also between Palestinians, extreme difficulties of movement and getting from one area to another. There are, to emphasize the apartheid nature, there are 13 different legal systems in different parts of that entire area. So the law that you're charged with and tried under varies according to who you are and which bit you live in. So there's a deliberate fragmentation there. What's been happening since last month and is very new, there is a sea change really, is that there's been more obvious unity between people in the different parts of Israel-Palestine, particularly vocal and led by people in what we consider as Israel proper, but they would say, they constantly now refer to it as Palestine 48. And I'm going to just say some bits from an online item I saw. It was put on by PSC, and there are 3 people speaking, one from Gaza, one from Haifa, and one from Jerusalem. In particular, the person from Haifa, whose name is Ria Al-Salana, yeah, that's it, Ria Al-Sanana, who has been in the UK with the Boycott National Committee, but she spoke very powerfully about the unification of the struggle, and the attacks on Gaza stemmed ultimately from the demonstrations about the evictions, the continuing evictions in two neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, that's Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan. So there were a lot of demonstrations, and during the military attacks on Gaza, which happened as a consequence of what was going on in East Jerusalem. So you can see the connection there already. And the nature of it is that there is it's younger people. There is a complete rejection of the existing political elites. So that includes means the Palestinian Authority, who have not they are sort of they have sort of subcontracted the security of the occupation, really, rather than being working actively for people's rights. So there's been a huge amount of new organising. So there are new collectives for mental health, medical assistance, and in particular legal assistance, because there's been over this period of time, during the Gaza attacks and subsequently, there have been mass arrests with no particular legal. You might get it put on you that perhaps you threw a stone or something, but they're going for the organisers. It's really a collective punishment for the actuality and the visual success in international social media of the unity of action and the unity of operation, both linking up Gaza, Palestine 48, Jerusalem, and West Bank. I'm quite interested in the collectives for legal help, which people need, because there are these mass arrests and you need to keep on top of it. That could be an opportunity for giving some funding. It's not a charity. She was saying this isn't charity. This is politics. So I'm looking out for that. But she also, Ria Al-Sana, also said, use our language, and she didn't mean Arabic by that. She meant it's Palestine 48. We're not Israeli Arabs. So that, I think, is quite significant. I can also add a bit to what Ria said. The chair of PSC, he's a professor in Birmingham, Kamal Hawash. He's from Jerusalem and he has family there. He's obviously been in contact a lot recently. He has some quite interesting things to say. Sheikh Jarrah, that neighborhood, has now become like Hebron. I don't know if you know what Hebron is like, but it's quite a big town. The center of it, it's very visibly apartheid land. The center is hollowed out, the shops are shut. Depending on who you are, you're channeled into certain pedestrian ways. There are places you can't go. So Sheikh Jarrah is it's surrounded. It's got militarized checkpoints, no entry for any Palestinian who isn't a resident, whereas settlers can come and go as they please. He also said, which is deeply shocking, in the other targeted area in East Jerusalem, Silwan, 1,000 families have been served notice to demolish their own houses. Now, I hadn't seen anything else on that until today, And there's somebody who's been very effective on social media from East Jerusalem, Mohammed Kurd, and he posted on the tweeted on the 8th of June, and I guess this is the same place. Residents of Bustan, which is in a district of Silwan, have been served notice that they must demolish their own homes within 21 days. And if they don't, then they will have to pay for the authorities to do it. But he also said, yeah, there was another more significant, possibly, in the time in early June, say various examples of aggression going on, but there were three people killed in Jenin, two of whom were Palestinian security forces, which is very unusual because normally the Palestine security forces get notified, they dodge out of the way, and the Israeli forces just come straight in and do whatever they want. On this occasion, the Israelis actually shot the Palestine security forces. Anyway, there was one other thing. Yeah, if on the sort of sense of that, the unity of that, the politics of that, the new politics of that, I would recommend, if you go on Jewish Voice for Labour, they post lots of articles, and there's a very recent one by Ramzi Baroud, and it's called The Slow Death of the Oslo Culture. So if you want to look into a bit more of that, you can see what I've described and where that's going in terms of the final dismissal of this false and sort of fig leaf, really, of the peace process and two-state solution and all of that. But Ramzi Baroud can say more about that. There's also an article on Jewish Voice for Labour about the what's it called? The strike. Is it national strike? It's called the Dignity Strike. Now that also was initiated by people in Palestine 48, by the High Follow-up Committee of Arab Citizens. It was not initiated by any of the trade unions, although they subsequently endorsed it. I can say a bit more about the national politics, but I'll save that for questions, possibly, as we're in a hurry. There's sort of, what can we do? I can give you examples of various actions on arms factories in the UK. There's also the boycott, divestment, sanctions, pension action, which is very important. And there's an initiative based in the UK, International Centre of Justice for Palestinians. It's directed by Crispin Blunt. And interestingly, he said, it's all going to be legal work. Parliamentary activity has achieved very, very little. Now, given that for years we've been telling people to write to their MPs, I think that's quite interesting and worth following. If I can quickly do I've got a 5-point thing to round off with. Ria, in terms of what we can do, she says, be attentive, emphasize that Zionism is an oppressive ideology. We must intensify BDS. That was a crucial thing. And that we must see this as part of other struggles. It's not just about Palestine. So I'll stop there. I've indicated what else I could say, and we'll go into questions. Yeah?